What would you do if the man you loved said he needed $10,000 for emergency surgery, and you offered to pay the hospital directly instead of sending him the money? My name is Grace, I'm 58 years old, and for 6 months I believed I'd found my soulmate, Dr. Michael Crawford, a compassionate surgeon working with Médecins Sans Frontières in Syria who understood grief like no one else. He'd lost his wife to cancer. I'd lost my husband in a car accident. We were two broken people healing together, planning a future, building trust across thousands of miles. Then Michael called in tears saying he needed emergency surgery for a burst appendix and couldn't access his medical insurance. He needed $10,000 immediately. I was ready to send it. I'd already sent him $23,000 for previous emergencies. But something my daughter said made me pause. Mom, if he really needs surgery, offer to pay the hospital directly. Any legitimate doctor would accept that. So I made that offer. And what happened next exposed not just Michael's lies, but a sophisticated medical fraud operation that had stolen over $67 million from victims worldwide, and taught me the one verification method that scammers can never defeat: offering to pay the supposed creditor directly instead of sending money to the person asking. Thank you for being here. I believe this story will help you or someone you love recognize medical emergency scams and the most powerful verification technique. So this is the perfect moment. Hit that like button and subscribe. You guarantee all the next stories without having to search for them. Now let's begin. I met Dr. Michael Crawford on Match.com in April 2024, 15 months after my husband James died in a highway accident. James and I had been married for 31 years. His sudden death at age 61 left me emotionally shattered and financially comfortable. Life insurance, retirement savings, a paid-off house in Denver, Colorado. My 2 adult daughters worried about me living alone, withdrawing from friends, existing but not truly living. Mom, you need connection, my younger daughter Sophia said during one of her intervention visits. Dad wouldn't want you isolated like this. Maybe try online dating? Not to replace Dad, just to remember you're still a person with a future. I resisted for months, but the loneliness eventually drove me to create a match profile emphasizing I wanted genuine companionship, not casual dating. Michael's profile appeared in my matches within days. His photos showed a handsome man in his early 60s with kind eyes and graying hair. His profile was thoughtful and detailed. Cardiovascular surgeon, currently volunteering with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders in Syria, widowed 3 years ago when his wife died from ovarian cancer, passionate about humanitarian medicine and helping underserved populations. His first message referenced something specific from my profile. Grace, you mentioned finding purpose through volunteering at the hospice where your husband received end-of-life care. That's profound, transforming personal tragedy into service for others. As a physician who's seen immense suffering, I've learned that meaning often emerges from our darkest experiences. I'd love to hear more about your journey if you're willing to share. I read that message repeatedly. Someone who understood that grief could become purpose? Someone who didn't offer empty platitudes about healing or moving on? Someone who recognized that loss fundamentally changes you in ways that can become meaningful. We messaged for 3 weeks before our first phone call. His voice was warm, educated, with a faint accent I couldn't place. Maybe British, possibly Australian. When I asked why he was on an American dating site while working in Syria, he explained, "Because my contract with MSF ends in November. I'm planning to return to the United States permanently and resume civilian medical practice. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent enough time in conflict zones. I want stability, companionship, and a life that includes more than trauma surgery." We talked for nearly 3 hours that first call, about our late spouses, our children. He had a son in medical school. Our careers. I'd been a high school guidance counselor for 28 years. Our fears about starting over after loss. He shared vulnerable moments about struggling with survivor's guilt after his wife's death, about questioning whether he deserved happiness again, about feeling disconnected from civilian life after years in humanitarian work. "Catherine's death devastated me," he said quietly. But what haunts me more is realizing I prioritized my career over our relationship. I was always in surgery, always on call, always choosing medicine over her. By the time she got diagnosed, I'd accumulated years of missed anniversaries and canceled plans. I don't want to make that mistake again. If I'm fortunate enough to find love at this stage of life, I want to be fully present. His words resonated deeply. James had been similar, dedicated to his engineering career, always working late, always one more project before retirement. I'd accepted it, even enabled it. And then he was gone, and all those delayed moments were lost forever. By June, Michael and I were talking daily, morning texts while he prepared for surgeries, lunch break calls between his medical shifts, evening video chats, or attempted video chats. The connection was always terrible. His face would appear pixelated and frozen, audio cutting in and out before we'd switch to audio only. The internet infrastructure in conflict zones is abysmal, he explained apologetically. We're lucky to have electricity consistently, let alone reliable internet. I wish I could see your beautiful face clearly instead of through frozen pixels. When I'm back in the States, we'll video chat properly. I accepted his explanations because everything else felt genuine. He shared details about his medical work, the trauma cases, the limited resources, the ethical challenges of triage in war zones. He asked thoughtful questions about my life, my daughters, my work at the hospice. He made me feel seen and valued in ways I hadn't since James died. In July, Michael started discussing his return to Denver, specifically Denver, where I lived. I've been researching medical opportunities there. Excellent hospital systems, strong humanitarian medicine community, and... He paused meaningfully. You're there. Grace, I'd like to build the next chapter of my life near you. If you're comfortable with that possibility. My heart raced. After 15 months of profound loneliness, someone wanted to choose me, to relocate his entire life to be near me. We started making concrete plans, the medical practices he'd apply to, neighborhoods he'd look at for apartments, how we'd introduce our children to each other, discussions about eventually combining households. I want to do this thoughtfully, Michael said during one evening call. No rushing, no assumptions. Just two people who understand loss trying to build something new together. It was exactly the approach I needed. Respectful, measured, acknowledging both the possibility and the caution appropriate for our age and experiences. Then, in early August, Michael asked for money for the first time. It was presented apologetically, almost embarrassed. Grace, I'm in an awkward situation. There's been a delay processing my MSF payment. Bureaucratic issues with international wire transfers. It happens sometimes with humanitarian organizations operating in conflict zones. I need to cover some personal expenses. About $3,200. Could you possibly help? I'll repay you within 2 weeks when my payment processes. I hesitated. $3,200 was significant. But Michael had been nothing but thoughtful and genuine for 4 months. This was temporary assistance for someone dedicated to humanitarian work, not a frivolous request. Of course, I said. How should I send it? He provided wire transfer details to an account he said belonged to an international transfer service used by aid workers. I sent the money that afternoon. Michael called immediately, his relief evident. Grace, thank you. You've saved me from an embarrassing situation. I'll repay you the moment my accounts are accessible. I can't express how much this means. For 48 hours, I felt good about helping. Then came the next request. And over the following months, a pattern emerged that I was too emotionally invested to recognize. Every financial crisis was followed by another. Every promised repayment was delayed by new complications. Every emergency required immediate funds. But when Michael called in late October saying he needed $10,000 for his own emergency surgery, my daughter Sophia asked the question that would change everything. Mom, if he really needs surgery, why not offer to pay the hospital directly? That simple suggestion would expose 6 months of elaborate lies and lead me straight to an FBI investigation that would reveal how medical professionals' identities are weaponized against trusting victims worldwide. Was I about to discover that the man I'd fallen for was a complete fabrication? Between August and late October, Michael asked for money 6 different times. Each request came with detailed medical or logistical explanations that sounded plausible to someone unfamiliar with how international humanitarian medicine actually works. $4,800 for Michael's son's medical school tuition payment that had been delayed due to banking issues. $5,200 for emergency medical supplies for his Syrian hospital, supposedly items his organization couldn't provide due to supply chain problems. $6,100 for legal fees related to a malpractice lawsuit from a patient who died during surgery Michael had performed. He said he needed immediate attorney payment to prevent the case from escalating. $20,900 for Michael's emergency return flight to the United States when his mother supposedly had a stroke and needed him. $3,700 for his mother's rehabilitation expenses that Medicare didn't fully cover. By late October, I'd sent him $23,000. My retirement savings, carefully built over decades, were significantly depleted. But Michael's promises were constant. The payment will clear next week. I'll repay everything once my accounts are sorted. You're investing in our future together. My daughters grew increasingly alarmed. My older daughter, Rachel, who works in finance, confronted me in September. Mom, you've sent this man $23,000 and you've never even video chatted clearly. Have you verified any of his stories? Have you looked him up? I became defensive. Rachel, Michael is a respected surgeon working for Doctors Without Borders. He's shown me his medical credentials, hospital identification, MSF documents, everything checks out. Have you verified those documents independently? Called MSF to confirm he works for them? I hadn't. I'd accepted everything Michael sent at face value because I trusted him, because he was a doctor, which implied integrity, because the alternative, that I was being systematically defrauded by someone posing as a humanitarian physician, was too devastating to accept. But Rachel's questions planted doubt that grew over the following weeks. Why had every payment timeline Michael promised been delayed? Why did new emergencies always arise just when previous ones were supposedly resolved? Why, after 6 months, had we never had a clear video conversation where I could see his face properly? Then, on October 28th, at 11:47 p.m. Denver time, Michael called. His voice was strained, in obvious pain. Grace, I'm so sorry to call this late. I'm in the hospital. They're admitting me for emergency surgery. I was instantly alert. What happened? Are you okay? He explained through what sounded like genuine physical distress. He'd been experiencing severe abdominal pain for 2 days, but had ignored it, thinking it was food poisoning. This evening, the pain became unbearable. His colleagues at the Syrian hospital examined him and diagnosed acute appendicitis. His appendix was close to rupturing. He needed emergency surgery immediately. The problem, Michael continued, his voice tight with pain, is that my medical insurance through MSF has lapsed due to the payment processing delays I mentioned. The Syrian hospital requires payment before surgery, $10,000 US dollars. Without it, they won't operate. Grace, I know I've asked for so much already, but this is literally life or death. A ruptured appendix can be fatal. I need this surgery within hours. The desperation in his voice was visceral. I could hear hospital sounds in the background, beeping machines, muffled voices in Arabic, the ambient noise of a medical facility. It sounded real. Michael, of course, I'll help. How quickly do you need it? Within 6 hours. The risk of rupture increases every hour we delay. I'm terrified, Grace. I've performed hundreds of appendectomies on other people. Now I'm the patient, and I'm genuinely scared. His vulnerability, a confident surgeon admitting fear, felt authentic. How could I refuse when someone I loved might die without my help? I'll arrange the wire transfer immediately, I started to say. But then I remembered my conversation with Sophia 3 days earlier. She'd visited for the weekend, and we'd discussed Michael's previous money requests. She'd been skeptical, asking why a respected surgeon working for a major humanitarian organization kept having financial emergencies. Mom, Sophia had said, if Michael ever asks for medical money specifically, offer to pay the hospital or doctor directly instead of sending him cash. Any legitimate medical professional would accept that arrangement. In fact, Most would prefer it because direct institutional payments create proper records. That advice echoed in my mind as Michael waited for my response. "Michael," I said carefully, "I want to help, but $10,000 is a substantial amount. What if I pay the hospital directly? Give me their billing department information and I'll wire the payment to them. That way you get your surgery, and I have proper documentation for such a large medical expense." Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. Then Michael's tone shifted. Less pain-stricken, more measured. "Grace, that's complicated. The Syrian hospital doesn't work like American hospitals. They require cash payment to the patient, who then pays the hospital. It's a different system. Plus, the billing department doesn't speak English well. It would create delays we don't have time for." His explanation raised immediate red flags. Doctors Without Borders operated in dozens of countries with local billing systems. They would absolutely have protocols for international payments. "Michael, I understand the urgency, but I'm not comfortable sending $10,000 without proper documentation. Surely your hospital can receive direct payment. What's the hospital's name? I'll contact them directly." Another pause. Then, "Grace, I'm hurt that you're questioning me in a medical emergency. After 6 months together, after everything I've shared, you don't trust me enough to help save my life. I thought what we had meant more than bureaucratic payment protocols. It was emotional manipulation, positioning my reasonable verification request as a betrayal of our relationship. But something my therapist had told me years ago suddenly resonated. When someone makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries, that's a sign the boundary is necessary. Michael, this isn't about trust. It's about being responsible with large financial transactions. If our relationship is real, you'll understand why I need to verify before sending $10,000. His response came after a tense pause. "Fine, I'll get you the hospital information. But Grace, every minute of delay increases the risk. If something happens to me because of this delay, I hope you can live with that." He hung up. I sat in my dark bedroom, shaking. Was I being paranoid and risking Michael's life? Or was I finally recognizing red flags I'd been ignoring for 6 months? So I decided to check his background online. But this time, instead of just searching for Michael, I did something more specific. I searched for Doctors Without Borders protocols for medical staff insurance and emergency care. What I found on the MSF website was damning. All MSF medical staff are covered by comprehensive insurance, including emergency medical care worldwide. Staff experiencing medical emergencies receive treatment through MSF's insurance network without requiring personal payment. Michael's claim that his MSF insurance had lapsed and that he needed $10,000 cash for his own emergency surgery was impossible if he actually worked for Doctors Without Borders. I kept searching. Dr. Michael Crawford, Doctors Without Borders. 0 results in MSF's public staff directories or medical publications. I searched medical licensing databases for Michael Crawford with cardiovascular surgery credentials. Nothing matched his claimed background. I did reverse image searches on his photos. The man in his profile pictures was a real Australian surgeon named Dr. James Morrison, who'd posted warnings about identity theft on his LinkedIn. My professional photos have been stolen by romance scammers. If someone using my image requests money for medical emergencies, report it immediately. My hands trembled as the truth crystallized. Michael Crawford didn't exist. The surgeon's identity was stolen. The humanitarian work was fictional. The medical emergency requiring $10,000 was fabricated. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every shared vulnerability, all of it was performance designed to extract maximum money. I'd sent $23,000 to a ghost, and I'd been hours away from sending $10,000 more before Sophia's advice stopped me. But instead of collapsing into shame, I felt cold fury. Because if Michael had lied about his medical emergency, he'd lied about everything, and I was going to find out exactly who he was and make sure he faced consequences. What I discovered would reveal this wasn't just a romance scam. It was part of a calculated medical fraud network specifically targeting widows with healthcare backgrounds. I didn't respond to Michael's hang-up. Instead, I spent the rest of the night systematically investigating every detail of his story. I searched for the Syrian hospital he'd mentioned, Al-Amal Medical Center in Aleppo. The hospital existed, but their website had no affiliation with Doctors Without Borders. I called their international patient services line. Thankfully, they had English-speaking staff. "Excuse me, do you have a Dr. Michael Crawford, American cardiovascular surgeon, currently admitted for emergency appendicitis surgery?" The representative checked their system. "Ma'am, we have no American physicians on staff currently, and no patient by that name admitted." I tried calling MSF's international headquarters in Geneva. After navigating their phone system, I reached a human resources representative. "I'm trying to verify employment for Dr. Michael Crawford, supposedly working in your Syria operations. After checking their databases, ma'am, we have no one by that name in our employ, current or recent past. If someone is claiming to work for Médecins Sans Frontières and requesting money, that's fraudulent misrepresentation. Please report it to your local authorities." Every verification attempt confirmed the same devastating truth. Michael Crawford was entirely fictional. I examined the documents he'd sent over months: MSF identification, hospital credentials, medical licenses, even his son's medical school records. I sent them to Rachel, who works with fraud investigators in her banking job. Within hours, she confirmed, "Mom, these are all forgeries. The letterheads are crude copies, the signatures are digital pastes, and the formatting doesn't match legitimate institutional documents. Whoever created these has done it before. These are professional fraud documents." At 3 a.m., exhausted and emotionally raw, I filed reports with Denver Police, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, and the Federal Trade Commission. I documented every conversation, every wire transfer, every promised repayment that never materialized. The FBI agent who called me back the next afternoon, Special Agent Lisa Henderson, was sympathetic but frank. "Ms. Grace, you've experienced what we call a medical professional romance scam. Scammers pose as doctors, nurses, or humanitarian workers because these identities convey automatic trust and credibility. The fake medical emergency for themselves is particularly cruel because it exploits your compassion and creates artificial urgency that bypasses rational evaluation. Can you recover my money? Unlikely. These operations move funds through multiple international accounts very quickly. By the time you sent money, it was probably already converted and moved through money laundering networks. But your report helps us track patterns. And Ms. Grace, there's something specific about your case that's caught our attention." "What?" "The detail about offering to pay the hospital directly instead of sending him money. That's actually a verification method we recommend, but most victims don't think to use it. The fact that you did, and his immediate resistance to that arrangement, provides clear evidence of fraud intent. Would you be willing to cooperate with a larger investigation?" I agreed immediately. Over the next week, Agent Henderson walked me through documenting everything. She explained that the pay directly verification method was one of the most reliable fraud detection techniques because legitimate emergencies can accommodate direct institutional payments, while scams cannot. "Scammers need the money sent to accounts they control," Agent Henderson explained. "When you offer to pay a hospital doctor or institution directly, it breaks their operational model. They can't provide legitimate third-party payment information because there is no legitimate third party. That's why Michael became evasive and tried to guilt you into sending money to him instead." She connected me with 3 other victims who'd been targeted by the same Dr. Michael Crawford identity. We created a group chat to compare experiences. Linda from Texas. "My Michael was supposedly an orthopedic surgeon working in Afghanistan. Same medical emergency story. Needed $12,000 for emergency surgery after a motorcycle accident. When I offered to pay the hospital directly, he got angry and accused me of not trusting him. I felt so guilty I almost sent the money anyway. Thank God I didn't." Patricia from California. "Mine was Dr. Robert Stevens, humanitarian surgeon in Kenya. Needed $15,000 for emergency gallbladder surgery. I actually did offer to pay the hospital, and he gave me fake hospital billing information, an email address that looked official. When I tried calling the hospital directly using a number I found independently, they'd never heard of Robert Stevens. That's when I realized." Jennifer from Ohio. Dr. David Morrison, cardiologist working in Syria. He needed $10,000 for an emergency heart procedure on himself, claimed his aortic valve was failing. When I suggested paying his surgeon directly, he said, "Real love doesn't require receipts and documentation." That phrase actually made me pause. Love shouldn't require abandoning common sense either. We'd all been targeted with variations of the same script. Respected medical professional working overseas, humanitarian mission, delayed insurance or payments, sudden medical emergency requiring immediate cash, resistance to direct institutional payment verification. The medical emergency for themselves is relatively new, Agent Henderson explained during a conference call with our victim group. Previously, these scams focused on medical emergencies for family members, sick children, elderly parents. But scammers found that targeting the victim themselves creates even more urgency and guilt. How can you say no when someone might die without your help? The FBI's investigation revealed we were part of a much larger pattern. The Dr. Michael Crawford identity had been used to target at least 62 women across North America over 18 months. Total losses exceeded $4.2 million. The operation appeared to be based in West Africa, likely Ghana or Nigeria, using stolen identities of real medical professionals. But Agent Henderson shared something that made my blood run cold. "Grace, your case is particularly concerning because the scammer specifically targeted you based on your healthcare background. Your match profile mentioned working at a hospice. That made you seem more credible as someone who'd understand medical emergencies and be sympathetic to a doctor's situation. They're using data mining to match victim profiles with optimal scam scripts." The sophisticated targeting was evident when Agent Henderson showed me how my personal information had likely been gathered. My social media posts about hospice volunteering, my mentions of James's death in a car accident, even my daughter's names, all of it had been studied and weaponized. They knew you'd worked in healthcare, so they used medical terminology to establish credibility, Agent Henderson explained. They knew you'd lost your husband suddenly, so they presented as a widower who understood grief. They knew you had adult daughters, so they mentioned having a son in medical school. Every detail was calculated to create maximum emotional resonance. Learning I'd been strategically targeted rather than randomly scammed somehow made it worse. This wasn't opportunistic crime. It was surgical precision. Ironic, given the fake surgeon context. Then, Agent Henderson shared news that would transform my role from victim to active participant in the investigation. "Grace, Michael contacted you again this morning, didn't he?" I checked my phone. Indeed, there were 3 messages I hadn't opened yet. "Grace, I'm so sorry about my reaction yesterday. The pain and fear made me emotional. I understand why you want to verify. Here's the hospital billing contact information. Please, can we talk? I'm scheduled for surgery in 3 hours, and I really need to hear your voice before I go under anesthesia. I love you, Grace. Whatever happens, I need you to know that. You've been my light in the darkness of this war zone." The emotional manipulation was transparent now that I recognized it. But Agent Henderson had a request. "Don't tell him you know the truth yet. Keep him engaged. If we can track his communications and identify his location, we might be able to coordinate with international law enforcement for arrests. Are you willing to continue the conversation while we monitor?" I thought about the 61 other women he'd victimized. I thought about future targets he'd deceive if not stopped. "Yes. Tell me exactly what to do." What I didn't know was that my cooperation would lead to discoveries far more disturbing than simple fraud, including evidence that some medical emergency scams were actually cover stories for something even more sinister. Thank you for staying with this story. If you're learning valuable verification techniques, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss how this ends. Back to the story. Following Agent Henderson's guidance, I responded to Michael's messages with carefully scripted replies designed to keep him engaged, while FBI technical teams traced his communications. "Michael, I'm sorry too. I was just scared about sending such a large amount. Of course I want to help. Send me the hospital billing information and I'll arrange payment immediately." His response came quickly. "Thank you, Grace. Here's the contact information for the hospital's international billing coordinator." He provided an email address. billing jalalamalhospital.sy, and a phone number with a Syrian country code. The FBI's cyber team immediately analyzed both. The email domain was registered 3 weeks ago through an anonymous service, not affiliated with any actual Syrian hospital. The phone number, when traced, revealed it was actually a VoIP service routed through Ghana, not Syria. "This is helpful evidence," Agent Henderson said. "He's providing you with fake institutional contacts, which proves fraud intent. Call the number and record the conversation. Let's see how deep this fabrication goes." I called the number Michael provided, recording everything. A man answered with a heavy accent. "Al-Alam Hospital, International Billing. How I help you?" "I need to arrange payment for Dr. Michael Crawford's emergency appendicitis surgery." Yes, Dr. Crawford. He is waiting for surgery. Payment is $10,000 US. You can wire transfer to our account. Can you verify some information first? What's Dr. Crawford's patient ID number? And when exactly is the surgery scheduled? Pause. Background noise suggesting he was consulting someone. Patient number is 4427B. Surgery is scheduled for 4 p.m. local time. And your name? So I have a contact for records? My name is Ahmed. I am billing coordinator. The conversation was obviously scripted, but I played along. "Ahmed, I'd like to speak with Dr. Crawford's surgeon before sending payment. Can you transfer me?" Longer pause. "The surgeon is in surgery currently, not available to talk." "Okay, then can I speak with Dr. Crawford himself?" "Dr. Crawford is preparing for surgery. He cannot talk now." Every request for verification was blocked with excuses. I thanked Ahmed and hung up. Agent Henderson's analysis was immediate. That was definitely not a hospital billing office. The person you spoke with had a West African accent, not Syrian. The patient ID format doesn't match Syrian medical record systems, and legitimate hospitals would facilitate verification conversations, not block them. This is clearly a fraud operation. But she shared something more disturbing. "Grace, our cyber team traced the VoIP number. It's connected to a larger network we've been investigating, what we call scam compounds. These are facilities in Ghana and Nigeria where multiple scammers work together, sharing scripts, targets, and infrastructure. Your Michael is probably one person in a team of 10 or 20 operating various scam identities simultaneously." The industrial scale was overwhelming. This wasn't a lone criminal. It was an organized operation with multiple employees, management structure, and optimized processes. Over the next few days, while I maintained contact with Michael, expressing concern about his surgery, asking about his recovery, keeping him engaged, the FBI's investigation expanded. They identified connections between my case and 17 other active medical emergency scams targeting women across North America. But the investigation took an unexpected turn when Agent Henderson called with disturbing news. "Grace, we've intercepted communications between your scammer and associates that suggest something beyond financial fraud. They're discussing potential secondary extractions. Basically, using the romantic relationship to recruit victims into other criminal activities." "What kind of activities?" "Money laundering, primarily. They convince victims they're helping with legitimate financial transactions, moving money for business deals or humanitarian projects, when they're actually helping launder stolen funds. Some victims unwittingly become money mules, which can result in criminal charges against them." The realization was chilling. I could have become not just a victim, but an unwitting accomplice to crimes against others. Agent Henderson continued, "There's also evidence suggesting some operations use the medical emergency script to identify victims with significant assets, then target them for more elaborate scams, fake investment opportunities, fraudulent real estate deals, even cryptocurrency schemes. The romance scam is just phase 1 of a longer exploitation plan." She showed me communications they'd intercepted where Michael and associates discussed my financial situation. Target has substantial retirement assets, owns home outright, no debt. High potential for extended extraction. Move to investment phase after medical emergency establishes payment pattern. I'd been evaluated like a business opportunity, my vulnerabilities analyzed, my financial capacity assessed. The romantic relationship I'd believed was genuine was actually a strategic investment designed to maximize criminal profit. But perhaps most disturbing was learning that some medical emergency scams were even more sinister. Grace, we've also identified cases where scammers use fake medical crises to manipulate victims into traveling to meet them, supposedly to help with recovery or provide care. Some of these victims have been robbed, physically threatened, or in extreme cases kidnapped for ransom. The medical emergency script isn't just about money. Sometimes it's about physical access to victims. The scope of potential danger made me feel sick. I'd considered flying to Syria to be with Michael during his supposed recovery. If I'd done that based on his fabricated medical emergency, what might have happened? "We're moving to arrest phase," Agent Henderson said. "We've identified the compound location in Accra, Ghana. Interpol and Ghanaian police are coordinating a raid. But first, we need you to make one final contact with Michael that will confirm his active status and provide the last piece of evidence we need." The FBI's plan was straightforward. I would tell Michael I'd arrange the $10,000 payment to the hospital, ask for his post-surgery update, and express plans to visit him during recovery. His responses would provide final confirmation of active fraud and potentially reveal details about the operation's structure. I sent the message Agent Henderson had scripted. "Michael, I just wired $10,000 to the hospital billing coordinator Ahmed. He confirmed your surgery was scheduled for this afternoon. How did it go? Are you okay? I'm looking into flights to come be with you during recovery. You shouldn't be alone after major surgery." The response came within 30 minutes. "Grace, thank you so much. The surgery was successful. I'm in recovery now, still groggy from anesthesia, but so grateful. However, there's a complication. The hospital is saying they didn't receive the full payment. Apparently there were international wire transfer fees that reduced the amount. They're saying they need an additional $2,200 to release me from the hospital. I'm so sorry to ask for more, but I literally can't leave until this is paid." The immediate follow-up request for more money, the classic scam pattern of endless escalating needs. But what interested Agent Henderson more was something else. "Grace, about you visiting. I would love nothing more. But the security situation in Syria has deteriorated. There was a bombing near the hospital yesterday. It's not safe for Americans right now. Maybe wait until I can travel back to the States instead." "He doesn't want you coming there," Agent Henderson explained, "because there's no there to come to. He's not in Syria. He's in Ghana. If you showed up at the actual Al-Alam hospital in Aleppo asking for Michael Crawford, you'd expose the entire fraud. So he has to discourage your visit while maintaining the fiction." I responded according to our script. "Michael, I understand about the security concerns, but I'm worried about you recovering alone. At minimum, let's video chat so I can see you're really okay. Your post-surgery condition, the hospital room, your doctors. I just need to see with my own eyes that you're being cared for properly." This was the critical request. Video evidence that he was actually in a Syrian hospital recovering from surgery. It was impossible for him to provide, which would force him to either admit the truth or create increasingly elaborate excuses. His response took 2 hours. "Grace, the hospital's internet is extremely limited right now due to damage from the bombing. Video calls aren't possible. I can maybe do a quick voice call later tonight when my pain medication wears off enough to talk clearly. Please understand, I want nothing more than to see your face, but the circumstances are preventing it." Every verification request met with a new obstacle. It was the pattern that should have been obvious from the beginning, but emotional investment had blinded me to it. Agent Henderson had what she needed. "Grace, this is clear evidence of ongoing fraud. He's claiming to have had surgery but can't provide any verifiable evidence. No video of himself post-surgery, no ability to facilitate verification conversations with medical staff, just continued requests for more money and resistance to any form of documentation. Combined with our technical evidence showing he's actually in Ghana, not Syria, we have everything needed for the raid." On November 15th, at 6 a.m. Accra time, Ghanaian police executed a coordinated raid on a compound in the Adenta district of Accra. They arrested 14 individuals and seized computers, phones, documents, and financial records. Agent Henderson called me with updates as information came in. Grace, the raid was successful. We've arrested the people operating the medical professional scam network, and what we found is extensive. Databases containing over 3,000 active victim profiles, scripts for different medical emergency scenarios, tutorials teaching new scammers how to impersonate doctors, and financial records showing they've stolen over $67 million globally in 3 years. Did you get Michael? The person I was actually talking to? We believe so. A man named Kwame Osei, age 31, appears to have been operating the Dr. Michael Crawford identity, along with several others. He had your name and photo on his target list, along with detailed notes about your background, your deceased husband, your daughter's names, your financial situation. You were quite literally a case file to him. Learning my identity as a victim was documented in a criminal's filing system felt violating in a new way. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a target profile with extraction potential noted in spreadsheets. But Agent Henderson shared something that complicated the moral clarity I wanted. Grace, several of the arrested individuals are claiming they were recruited under false pretenses. They say they were promised legitimate customer service work, and only after arrival in Ghana learned they'd be operating romance scams. Some are saying they've wanted to quit but were threatened with violence or having their passports withheld. The same moral complexity I'd heard about in other fraud cases. Some perpetrators were also victims, trapped in exploitation that forced them to exploit others. What about Kwame, the one who targeted me specifically? He's not claiming coercion. He appears to have been a willing participant, possibly even mid-level management in the operation. He was training newer scammers, optimizing scripts, managing target assignments. We found communications where he discussed you specifically. Healthcare background target is highly responsive. Strong emotional investment established. Medical emergency script will be maximally effective. Projected extraction potential, $40,000, $60,000. Reading those words, seeing myself discussed as an extraction opportunity with projected profit potential, made me feel like an object, a resource to be harvested. He calculated that I was worth $40,000 to $60,000 to him, and he almost got me there if not for Sophia's suggestion to offer direct payment. That one verification method saved you at least $10,000, possibly more. And Grace, your willingness to cooperate with this investigation has helped us shut down an operation that was actively targeting hundreds of people. The intelligence we gathered from this raid will help us pursue related operations. Your impact goes far beyond just your own case. The arrests made international news. Romance scam network busted in Ghana. $67 million stolen through fake medical emergencies. My name wasn't mentioned, but the details were public, and suddenly I was receiving messages from other victims. Over the next week, I heard from 17 women who'd been targeted by Dr. Michael Crawford, or similar medical professional identities. Their stories were painfully familiar. The thoughtful approach, the genuine seeming connection, the humanitarian mission that explained limited communication, the cascade of financial emergencies, and finally the fake medical crisis requiring immediate funds. One woman, Dorothy from Florida, shared something that haunted me. I did send the $10,000 for his emergency surgery, and then another $8,000 for complications, and then $6,000 for rehabilitation, and then $4,500 for his flight home. I sent $28,500 total before he disappeared. When I saw the news about the arrests, I finally understood. But Grace, what hurts most isn't the money. It's that I genuinely loved him. I'd convinced myself we had something real. Finding out it was all performance, all calculated manipulation, I don't know how to trust anyone again. Her words resonated completely. The financial loss was devastating, but the psychological damage, the weaponization of love, the corruption of trust, the shame of having been so thoroughly deceived, that was deeper and longer lasting. What would justice actually look like for victims whose primary wound wasn't financial? The victim support network that formed after the arrests became a lifeline for many of us. We created a private Facebook group, initially just the 4 women Agent Henderson had connected me with, but within weeks it grew to 47 members, all victimized by medical professional romance scams. The psychological patterns among victims were remarkably consistent. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a trauma therapist who volunteered with our group, explained, "Medical professional scams are particularly damaging because they exploit multiple trust layers simultaneously. You're trusting someone as a romantic partner, as a medical expert, and as a humanitarian helper. When all three layers are revealed as fabrications, the betrayal creates what we call complex trust trauma, difficulty trusting not just romantic partners, but professionals, helpers, and even your own judgment." Many victims struggled with intense shame. The victim blaming in online comments was brutal. "How stupid do you have to be to fall for a fake doctor? She deserved to lose her money for being so gullible." "Lonely, desperate woman sends money to obvious scammer." Shocking. The cruelty was compounded by the fact that many of us had healthcare backgrounds. I'd worked at a hospice. Linda was a retired nurse. Patricia had been a hospital administrator. We weren't ignorant about medical systems, yet we'd still been deceived. Dr. Mitchell helped reframe this. "Your medical knowledge actually made you more vulnerable, not less." The scammers used terminology and scenarios you recognized, which made them seem more credible. They exploited your professional familiarity to bypass your skepticism. That's sophisticated manipulation, not victim stupidity. In December, I was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee examining online fraud and elder financial exploitation. I sat in a Washington, D.C. hearing room and shared my story, emphasizing the verification method that had saved me from losing more. "Senator, the single most effective fraud detection technique I've learned is this: offer to pay the supposed creditor directly instead of sending money to the person making the request. Legitimate emergencies can accommodate direct institutional payment. Fraudulent ones cannot." When I offered to pay Michael's hospital directly, his immediate resistance and evasion revealed the scam. One senator asked, "Ms. Grace, but isn't it reasonable that someone in a medical emergency might resist complicated payment arrangements due to pain, confusion, or urgency?" That's exactly what the scammers count on. That will override our better judgment due to artificial urgency and emotional manipulation. But here's the reality. If someone truly needs medical care, they'll welcome any offer of payment, regardless of the mechanism. If they resist direct payment verification, that resistance itself is a red flag. My testimony got significant media coverage. Romance scam victim testifies, "Offer to pay directly. Scammers can't accept." Multiple news outlets covered the story, and suddenly, I was receiving interview requests. I started doing media appearances specifically to publicize the direct payment verification method. I appeared on morning shows, podcasts, local news programs, always emphasizing, before sending money for any emergency, medical, legal, travel, offer to pay the institution or professional directly. Get names, license numbers, institution contact information. Then verify independently using information you find yourself, not information they provide. The coverage generated both support and backlash. Some people were grateful and said the technique had helped them identify scams before losing money. Others were dismissive. Common sense. Anyone with half a brain would know to verify. But Dr. Mitchell helped me understand the victim-blaming psychology. When people mock fraud victims, they're engaging in protective cognitive distortion. They're convincing themselves they're too smart to be scammed, which makes them feel safe. But that false confidence actually makes them more vulnerable because they don't practice appropriate verification behaviors. In January 2025, the restitution process began. Ghanaian authorities had seized approximately $2.8 million in assets from the scam compound. After legal proceedings, this would be distributed among identified victims proportionally based on losses. Agent Henderson estimated I might recover $1,800, about 8% of my $23,000 loss. It was something, but it meant $21,200 was gone forever, likely already laundered through cryptocurrency exchanges and networks the FBI couldn't penetrate. The money that wasn't seized was moved too quickly for us to trace, Agent Henderson explained. We recovered what we could, but the majority is unrecoverable. I'm sorry, Grace. I'd already accepted this reality. The money was gone. No amount of investigation would change that. What mattered now was preventing future victims. Our support group created educational materials specifically about medical emergency scams, partnering with AARP and the FBI to distribute them widely. We produced videos, pamphlets, workshop curricula teaching the direct payment verification method. The key messages were, offer to pay creditors directly, never through the person requesting funds. Verify independently using contact information you find yourself. Legitimate emergencies can wait for verification. Fake ones create artificial urgency. Trust is earned through transparency, not demanded through guilt. We presented workshops at senior centers, community organizations, and even medical facilities. The response was gratifying. After one presentation in Denver, a woman approached me. Grace, I'm currently in exactly the situation you described. My boyfriend says his son needs emergency surgery and wants me to send $18,000. But after hearing your story, I'm going to offer to pay the hospital directly. If he's legitimate, he'll accept. If not, I've just saved myself from what you experienced. 2 days later, she emailed. You saved me. I offered direct payment and he got angry, accused me of not trusting him and blocked me. Thank God I didn't send money. Those moments made all the public vulnerability worthwhile. In February, Kwame Ose's trial concluded in Ghana. He was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. He was sentenced to 15 years in Ghanaian prison. I felt conflicted about the outcome. Part of me wanted harsher punishment. I felt conflicted about the outcome. Part of me wanted harsher punishment. He'd stolen millions and destroyed lives. Part of me recognized that 15 years in a Ghanaian prison was genuinely severe and wondered if punishment alone would address the systemic conditions that created these operations. The other arrested individuals received varying sentences based on their level of involvement. Those who could prove coercion received lighter sentences and deportation to their home countries. Those who were willing participants received prison terms ranging from 3 to 12 years. But the operation's leadership, the people who'd designed the scripts, built the infrastructure, and profited most from the network, remained unidentified and free. The compound in Accra was one node in a larger network that continued operating from other locations. We shut down one cell, but the organization adapts and rebuilds, Agent Henderson told me during a follow-up call. New compounds open in different countries. New scripts are developed. New victims are targeted. This is ongoing asymmetric warfare. The reality was demoralizing, but also motivating. If law enforcement couldn't permanently stop these operations, then education and prevention became even more critical. 8 months after discovering Michael's fraud, I'd achieved something unexpected, a sense of purpose stronger than what I'd had before the scam. My work as a hospice volunteer had been meaningful, but my fraud prevention advocacy felt urgent and impactful in immediate ways. My therapy with Dr. Mitchell helped me process the complex emotions. Grace, you experienced profound betrayal. Someone weaponized your grief over James's death, your medical knowledge, and your capacity for compassion. That's traumatic. But you've responded by becoming someone who protects others from similar trauma. That's post-traumatic growth. I'd also rebuilt my financial stability. The $21,200 I'd lost was significant, but I adjusted my retirement plans, reduced expenses, and found peace with a more modest lifestyle. I realized that financial security mattered less than I'd thought compared to purpose and connection. My daughters had been incredibly supportive. Sophia, whose suggestion about direct payment had saved me from losing more, never once said, "I told you so." Instead, she'd helped me file reports, organize evidence, and navigate the emotional aftermath. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Sophia said during one visit. "Not because you avoided being scammed completely. That can happen to anyone. I'm proud because when you discovered the truth, you fought back intelligently. The direct payment offer was brilliant. And then turning your experience into education for others? That's transforming trauma into impact." Rachel, who'd initially been skeptical of Michael, had been equally supportive. "Mom, I work in banking fraud prevention. I see sophisticated scams every day. What happened to you could happen to experts in my field. These operations are that good. There's no shame in being targeted by professionals. Their validation mattered more than recovering the money ever could. I also made peace with the complicated feelings about Kwame and the other operators. They'd caused real harm and deserved accountability. But I also recognized that economic desperation in Ghana and Nigeria created environments where fraud became a rational survival choice for some people. That doesn't excuse the harm, Dr. Mitchell emphasized, but understanding systemic factors helps prevent future victims. If we only focus on individual punishment without addressing the conditions that create these operations, we're not actually solving the problem. In April 2025, I received an unexpected email through Agent Henderson. It was from one of the arrested operators, not Kwame, but a younger man named Joseph who'd been working at the compound for only 3 months before the raid. Mrs. Grace, I don't expect forgiveness. I helped steal from you and many others. But I want you to know something. When I was assigned your case file, I was told to study your background and identify vulnerabilities. I read that your husband died in a car accident. I read about your work at hospice. I saw photos of you with your daughters. And I felt sick about what I was being trained to do. Exploit your grief and kindness for money. But I was threatened with deportation and violence if I refused. That's not an excuse. I still made terrible choices. But I wanted you to know that I saw you as a real person, not just a target. And that made me hate what I was doing. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to respond. Joseph's confession didn't undo the harm, but it added moral complexity I found difficult to navigate. Could I condemn someone who'd been coerced into victimizing me while also recognizing their own victimization? I consulted Dr. Mitchell. Grace, you're allowed to hold both truths. Joseph participated in harming you, which is wrong. And Joseph was exploited and threatened, which is also wrong. Both things are true. You don't have to choose one narrative. I eventually responded to Joseph. I don't forgive you yet. Maybe I never will. But I appreciate you acknowledging my humanity. I hope you find legitimate work and never participate in hurting people again. That's not absolution. Just a hope that you'll make different choices going forward. His response came 2 weeks later. Thank you for seeing me as human even when I acted like a monster. I'm taking computer programming classes while detained. When I'm deported back to Nigeria, I want to build something legitimate. Your grace, acknowledging my humanity, makes me believe that's still possible. The exchange didn't erase what had been done, but it created a small bridge across the victim-perpetrator divide, a recognition that humans are complicated and capable of both harm and change. By summer 2025, 1 year after Michael first contacted me, I'd given over 40 presentations about medical emergency scams and the direct payment verification method. I'd helped an estimated 200+ people recognize scams before losing money. I'd contributed to FBI cases that resulted in additional arrests. The work wasn't glamorous or lucrative, but it was meaningful. And meaning I'd learned was more valuable than the comfort I'd lost when I sent $23,000 to a ghost. In August 2025, Agent Henderson contacted me with unexpected news. Grace, we've identified a new medical emergency scam operation that appears to be run by survivors of the Ghana raid, people who escaped before arrests or were part of the network but not at that specific compound. They're using refined versions of the same scripts, targeting the same demographics. And they've specifically mentioned you in their communications. What do you mean, mentioned me? We intercepted messages where they discuss your public advocacy work. They view you as a threat because you're teaching potential victims the direct payment verification method. There's discussion about neutralizing your impact, either through intimidation or by targeting you directly with a sophisticated scam designed specifically to embarrass you and undermine your credibility. The threat felt surreal. How would they target me? I know all their tactics now. That's what makes you an interesting challenge to them. They want to prove their methods can fool even educated, experienced victims. It's ego, partly, but also strategic. If they can successfully scam someone who's become a public voice against scams, it undermines fraud prevention messaging. She proposed something risky. Grace, we'd like to use you as bait again. Create a new online presence, make yourself visible as a potential target, and see if they approach you. With proper FBI support and monitoring, we might be able to trace back to their operation and shut them down. I hesitated. The Ghana investigation had been stressful enough. Did I want to voluntarily re-enter that world? But I thought about the victims still being targeted right now. About the women sending money to fake doctors, believing in fabricated emergencies, depleting their savings for people who didn't exist. I'll do it. But I want strict parameters about when we stop. I'm not risking my actual safety or my family's well-being for this. Over the next month, the FBI helped me create a new online persona, Margaret Thompson, a 62-year-old recently divorced nurse from Phoenix with substantial assets from a divorce settlement. We built a complete digital footprint, LinkedIn profile showing healthcare career, Facebook account with posts about adjusting to single life, participation in widow divorce support forums expressing loneliness. Within 3 weeks, Margaret received her first approach, a message on Match.com from Dr. James Mitchell, emergency medicine physician, currently working with International Medical Corps in Somalia. The profile was sophisticated, using photos we couldn't immediately identify as stolen. His approach was similar to Michael's, thoughtful, references to specific details from my profile, emphasis on meaningful connection rather than superficial attraction. I engaged carefully, following FBI protocols. The relationship developed familiarly. 3 weeks of messaging, transition to WhatsApp, phone calls with poor video quality, discussions of returning to the United States and building a life together. But there were differences that suggested the operation had learned from the Ghana arrests. James was more cautious about financial requests, waiting longer to establish trust. He provided more verifiable details, supposed medical license numbers, hospital affiliations, conference appearances. They're adapting, Agent Henderson observed. They know law enforcement is tracking certain patterns, so they're modifying their approach to avoid detection. By October, James had asked for money twice, $3,800 for his mother's medical expenses and $5,600 for legal fees related to a contract dispute. I sent FBI-provided marked funds both times. Then came the test. Margaret, I have difficult news. I need emergency surgery. I was injured during a mortar attack near our hospital compound. Shrapnel in my abdomen. I need immediate surgical intervention, about $12,000. But Margaret, I know you're cautious. I want you to feel completely comfortable. Here's what I propose. Contact International Medical Corps directly, verify I work for them, and arrange payment through their medical emergency fund. They'll confirm everything. This was unexpected. He was proactively offering the verification method I'd been teaching. Direct institutional payment confirmation. Agent Henderson's team investigated immediately. Grace, this is concerning. International Medical Corps is a legitimate organization, and there is a process for supporting medical staff emergencies. If he's actually affiliated with them, or if he's somehow infiltrated their systems to create false verification, this could be more sophisticated than anything we've seen. I called International Medical Corps using a number I found independently on their website. I'm trying to verify employment for Dr. James Mitchell, supposedly working in your Somalia operations. The representative checked their systems. Ma'am, we have no Dr. James Mitchell in our employ, current or past. If someone is claiming to work for International Medical Corps and requesting money, that's fraudulent impersonation. Please report it immediately. Ah, so it was still a scam, but a more sophisticated version that anticipated the verification step and tried to create false legitimacy. But here's what troubled me. How had they known to proactively address the direct payment verification method unless they were specifically aware of my public advocacy teaching that technique? Agent Henderson confirmed my suspicion. Grace, we think this operation specifically designed this approach to target you or people educated by you. They're trying to overcome the verification barrier you've been teaching. They anticipated you'd want direct institutional confirmation, so they presented a legitimate-seeming institution, gambling that you wouldn't actually contact them. This is tailored counter-tactics. The sophistication was both impressive and terrifying. These weren't amateur criminals. They were adaptive professionals who studied fraud prevention techniques and developed workarounds. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We spring the trap. Contact James, tell him you've verified with International Medical Corps and want to proceed with payment. His response will reveal whether he knows his cover is blown." I sent the message. "James, I called International Medical Corps directly. They have no record of you as an employee. I think you need to explain what's actually happening here." His response would determine whether this investigation ended with arrests or opened into something even larger and more dangerous. James's response took 6 hours, an eternity compared to his usual rapid replies. When it came, it was completely unlike his previous warm, caring messages. "Margaret, you're very thorough. Most people don't actually make the verification calls. They just feel reassured by the offer. You're different. That's interesting." The sudden shift from compassionate doctor to clinical analyst was jarring. Agent Henderson immediately flagged it. "Grace, he just broke character. That's significant. He's no longer pretending to be James. He's speaking as himself, whoever that is." I responded according to our script. "Who are you really?" His reply came quickly this time. "Does it matter? You already know I'm not Dr. James Mitchell. Just like you weren't really Grace when Michael Crawford was talking to you last year. We know who you are. Grace Henderson from Denver. We've known from the beginning. This entire interaction has been testing whether our evolved methods could fool even an educated victim. Apparently not. You're good at this. Impressive, actually." Agent Henderson's team was frantically tracing the messages in real time, but he was using sophisticated VPN routing that made immediate location difficult. "Why target me specifically?" I typed. "Because you've become a problem. You're teaching people our vulnerabilities, the direct payment verification, the institutional confirmation calls. You're costing us money. We wanted to demonstrate that even you could be fooled with sufficiently sophisticated approaches. We failed. That's useful information. Now we know we need to refine further." He was treating this like a professional challenge, a game of cat and mouse where victims were just obstacles to overcome. "How many people are you currently scamming?" I asked. "Why would I tell you that? But since you're clearly working with law enforcement and this conversation is being monitored, hi FBI, I'll give you something to think about. You shut down one compound in Ghana. That temporarily disrupted operations. We rebuilt in 4 different countries within 6 weeks. You arrested 17 people. We recruited 32 replacements within a month. For every operation you shut down, we established 2 more. You can't win this, Grace. We're faster, more adaptive, and more motivated than any law enforcement response." Agent Henderson was furious. He's taunting us, but he's also revealing operational details. "Keep him talking." "What motivates you?" I asked. "Is it just money?" "Partly, but also the intellectual challenge. Building systems that exploit human psychology, testing different approaches, optimizing conversion rates. It's fascinating work. You could call us criminals. We call ourselves behavioral engineers. We study what makes people trust, what makes them override rational judgment, what emotional triggers reliably produce financial transactions. It's applied social psychology at scale." The clinical, academic way he discussed destroying lives was chilling. "You're hurting real people," I typed. "People who trusted you, who believed you cared about them. Are we, though? Think about it, Grace. We provide something people desperately want: connection, romance, feeling valued. We deliver that product temporarily. Yes, there's a financial cost, but people pay for emotional experiences all the time. Movies, therapy, dating services. We're just a different pricing model. And honestly, most victims recover financially. It's not like we're murdering anyone." The sociopathy was breathtaking, reframing fraud as a service business, victim suffering as acceptable overhead. Agent Henderson sent me a message. He's in Lagos, Nigeria. We've traced his location to a specific district. Nigerian police are preparing for a coordinated strike. Keep him engaged for 10 more minutes. "What happens when you get caught?" I asked. "Some operators get arrested. Most don't. And even those who do, the prison sentences are manageable, and they come out with valuable experience and connections. It's a career risk, like any business, but the profit margins justify the risk. So this just continues forever? An endless cycle of scams and victims? Until something fundamentally changes about human psychology or global economic inequality, yes. People will always be lonely, desperate for connection, and willing to believe in unlikely romance. And we'll always be here to provide that fantasy, for a price. You can educate potential victims, Grace. That's noble. But you'll never educate all of them. You'll never overcome the fundamental human need to believe that love is possible, that connection can happen magically online, that someone finally understands them. We exploit hope, and hope is inexhaustible. Time, Agent Henderson said. Nigerian police are moving in now. Suddenly, the message patterns changed. Wait, something's happening. I need to go. Then, they're here, police. How did you? The messages stopped. 20 minutes later, Agent Henderson called. Grace, they got him. Nigerian police raided the location in Lagos. They arrested 6 individuals, including the person you were communicating with. A man named Adewale Ogunlade, age 34, apparently a mid-level operator in a network we've been tracking for 2 years. They seized extensive evidence, computers, phones, victim databases. This is significant. But her tone suggested complications. However, before the arrest, he managed to send a warning message to associates. Other cells of the network are going dark, shutting down operations temporarily to avoid detection. We got this node, but the network is adapting in real time. It was the pattern we'd seen before. Partial victories, adaptive enemies, ongoing struggle. The Lagos raid yielded remarkable intelligence. Adewale had detailed records of over 800 active victims across 27 countries. Total ongoing extractions exceeded $34 million. The sophistication of their operations was evident in training materials, psychological manipulation guides, and A/B-tested scripts optimized for different demographics. But perhaps most chilling was a document titled Counter-Fraud Prevention Tactics, literally a guide for overcoming victim education efforts like mine. It included strategies for proactively addressing verification concerns before victims raise them, creating fake institutional confirmation processes, using legitimate organizations' names with slight variations, exploiting victims' desire to trust by offering seemingly transparent verification. They'd studied fraud prevention messaging and developed explicit counter-tactics. It was adaptive evolution in real time. This is both terrifying and valuable, Agent Henderson said, reviewing the seized materials. Terrifying because it shows how sophisticated these operations have become. Valuable because understanding their counter-tactics helps us develop better prevention strategies. Over the following weeks, intelligence from the Lagos raid led to coordinated operations in 3 other countries: Kenya, Ghana, and the Philippines. Authorities arrested 29 individuals and shut down multiple compounds. But Agent Henderson's summary was sobering. We've disrupted significant operations, but the network leadership remains unidentified. They operate through layers of insulation that protect them from direct exposure. The people we arrested are operators and managers, not the architects. Still, the arrests represented meaningful impact. 800 victims were contacted and warned before losing more money. Ongoing scams were disrupted. Future victims were protected through operational shutdowns. It wasn't total victory, but it was real progress. 6 months after the Lagos raid in March 2026, I stood before an audience of 400 people at a fraud prevention conference in Washington, D.C. I shared my full story, from believing in Michael to recognizing the scam through the direct payment offer, from cooperation with the FBI to the Lagos investigation. But I focused most on the practical lesson. The single most effective fraud detection technique is offering to pay supposed creditors directly rather than sending money to the person requesting it. This works because legitimate emergencies can accommodate direct payment. Fraudulent ones cannot, because there's no actual creditor. Resistance to direct payment is itself evidence of fraud. It provides immediate, actionable verification without requiring extensive investigation. I demonstrated with examples. If someone says they need money for medical bills, offer to pay the hospital. If they need legal fees, offer to pay the attorney. If they need travel costs, offer to buy the ticket directly. Legitimate needs will welcome this help. Fraudulent requests will resist with excuses. One conference attendee asked, "But Ms. Grace, scammers are now developing counter-tactics to your verification method." The Lagos raid documents showed they're explicitly training operators to overcome direct payment verification. Doesn't that make your technique less effective? It makes it more important, I responded. Yes, sophisticated scammers will try to create fake institutional verification. That's why the technique has a second step. Verify independently using contact information you find, not information they provide. Call the hospital using a number from the hospital's official website. Contact the attorney through their State Bar Association listing. Use verified independent sources. This two-step process, offer direct payment plus independent verification, remains reliable even against sophisticated counter-tactics. The truth was that fraud prevention was an arms race. Scammers adapted to our techniques. We adapted to their counter-tactics. It was ongoing strategic evolution with real human consequences. My victim advocacy work had become a permanent part of my identity. I consulted with law enforcement on active cases, developed educational materials, spoke at conferences and community events, and maintained support networks for survivors. The $21,200 I'd lost still hurt. My retirement was less comfortable than planned, but I'd found something more valuable than financial security, purpose rooted in protecting others. My therapy with Dr. Mitchell had helped me integrate the experience into my life narrative without letting it define me entirely. Grace, you're more than what happened to you. Yes, you were victimized by a sophisticated fraud, but you're also a mother, a hospice volunteer, an advocate, a friend, a person with interests and relationships beyond this experience. Don't let the scam become your entire identity. She was right. I'd rebuilt a full life. Book club, gardening, time with grandchildren, travel with friends. The fraud was part of my story, but not the whole story. In April 2026, I received unexpected news from Agent Henderson. The FBI had identified and arrested the suspected architect of the medical emergency scam network, a Nigerian national who'd been coordinating operations across 7 countries. Using intelligence from multiple raids, they'd finally penetrated the organizational layers that had protected leadership. This is as close to justice as we get in these cases, Agent Henderson told me. Not perfect, not complete, but meaningful. The restitution I received totaled $2,000, about 9% of my $23,000 loss. The remainder was gone forever, laundered beyond recovery. But I'd helped prevent an estimated $340,000 in losses by teaching people the direct payment verification method. Hundreds of potential victims had contacted me saying my story had helped them recognize scams before losing money. That impact was worth more than recovered funds. 2 years after Michael Crawford first contacted me, I'd transformed from victim to educator to advocate. I'd learned that perfect justice was impossible, but meaningful impact was achievable. I'd discovered that vulnerability wasn't weakness when wielded purposefully. The medical emergency scam playbook still existed. Scammers still used it. People still lost money. But more people now knew to offer direct payment and verify independently. More people understood that legitimate emergencies welcome verification, while fraudulent ones resist it. And sometimes, that knowledge made the difference between devastating loss and narrow escape. That's what my $23,000 bought. Wisdom earned through pain, shared through purpose, protecting strangers I'll never meet from experiencing what I survived. 3 years after offering to pay, Dr. Michael Crawford's hospital directly, the offer that exposed the fraud and saved me from losing more, I received a letter from a woman named Helen in Toronto. Dear Grace, I just watched your TED Talk about offering direct payment as fraud detection. Yesterday, my boyfriend asked for $15,000 for his daughter's emergency surgery. I offered to pay the hospital directly. He became angry, accused me of not trusting him, and blocked me on everything. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. I'd already sent him $8,000 for previous emergencies, But your advice stopped me from sending more. Thank you for turning your pain into protection for people like me. I pinned her letter next to 43 others from people who'd used the direct payment technique to identify scams. One simple question, can I pay them directly, had protected hundreds of thousands of dollars across dozens of victims. Sometimes the simplest verification is the most powerful. If someone you've never met in person asks you for money for any emergency, medical, legal, travel, family crisis, do this one thing before sending $1. Offer to pay the supposed creditor directly instead of sending money to them. If it's medical, give me the hospital's contact information and I'll pay them directly. If it's legal, what's your attorney's name? I'll pay their office directly. If it's travel, I'll buy the ticket for you directly. Legitimate emergencies will welcome this help. Fraudulent ones will resist with excuses. That resistance is your answer. Visit FBI.gov scams to report fraud. Share this story. One technique can save thousands. Comment: have you ever been asked to send emergency money?